Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Turnbuckles, Trunks, and Titles. Now, y'all know me, I am Nick, but it's not always about me, Sometimes it's about the man of the hour, the man with the power, and sometimes he's so sweet that damn he can be sour. And they call him Cueball Carmichael. Q, welcome to the show, my man.
Hey, Nick, how are you, man? Another Tuesday night. We got a lot of people tuning in. We got a great topic for the show. I'm really excited. It's going to be a great show.
It's going to be an excellent show, I guarantee it. And I'm going to tell you, when you're talking NWA, it's like playing in Cueball's home court, if you will. It's like Cueball is the home team kind of deal, And Q, I am pumped. I'm excited. And I know you did your homework, but at the same time, you didn't have to do a lot of homework because you live for this stuff and you lived for the NWA. So why don't you give them a glimpse on what we're doing tonight?
Well, what we're going to do tonight, since we've already covered the NWA Championship and went through the history of the National Wrestling Alliance from start to finish, what we thought we'd do is go with some of the non-World Championship titles. We're going to cover the NWA TV title, and we're going to cover the National Heavyweight Championship. And then we're going to talk about a few guys in the mix. And guys, you're going to have to bear with us because we're going to do this probably in a multi-part series. But right now, there's so much data and so much information, and it really was, I study a lot of wrestling, and I either go back to the 50s and 60s or I pop up into the 80s and some of the 90s, but the 80s is really my thing. That was my decade of coming of age and becoming a pro wrestler. And back then, you'd get a third burnt copy of a VHS tape if you were lucky, and it'd be squiggly and you couldn't take the tracking and turn it down, and you just had to watch it. But, that was an era where other wrestlers could watch wrestling and learn from it. The 80s is a very educational decade because you can always go back to that style of wrestling. And one of the things we did here when we were running Mall, Mid-Atlantic Wrestling League, which we plan to start up again soon. But when we were running Mall, what we did with the shows is we went old school. What I mean by that is we would have a 2-hour and 20-minute event, 20-minute intermission, 2 hours of wrestling, three matches, intermission, 3 matches, of course, the main event. But, we really went back to the 80s for what we did. We focused on wrestling. The pile driver was an illegal move. There were a lot of things. If you were counted on a 10 count, you could lose the championship. We really went back to a lot of the 80s stuff. And gang, if you really want to watch a great match with incredible psychology, watch Randy Savage and Austin Idol from 1984. I believe it's May 15th, 1984, the Mid-South Coliseum. And if you really want to learn some incredible psychology, watch that match. It's really great. I'll tag it and put it up in the corner pocket later. You guys can watch it. If you're not a member of the Corner Pocket, make sure you send a request to Cueball's Corner Pocket. We'll get you in there. Also, guys, want to let you know, you've been doing a great job going over to YouTube, Triple T Radio, one word, space, live. And you can find not only our show, but Truthbusters too. And we've asked you to go over there and hit like and subscribe. There's a lot of footage in there now. There's some really good stuff. So go over there and check that out on YouTube. Again, it's Triple T Radio, space, live. And you'll have access to Truthbusters and Turnbuckles, Trunks, and Titles. So we ask you to do that. But let's get right into it. Let's cover the National Wrestling Alliance TV title. To me, that was the greatest TV title in any federation ever because you got to see incredible guys have great matches every week on TV. It used to be back in the day, if Flair and Steamboat were going at it or Flair and Funk, you would never get to see them wrestle unless you bought a ticket and went to the Omni in Atlanta because all the big main events and the blow-off matches were all at the Omni in Atlanta. So you had to go live. But the TV title was defended almost weekly. And I just thought it was a great title, great NWA title. So we're going to start at 1980. And on January 5th, 1980, at a live event, Steve Travis was the NWA TV title champion. And if you don't know who he is, look him up. I thought he was a great wrestler. But he lost the title rather quickly 7 days later to a guy we're going to talk about later, Austin Idol, the Universal Heartthrob. And for those of you that don't know it, and Nick and I were talking about this off the air, Hulk Hogan admits to stealing Austin Idol's gimmick. And the gimmick was, at a certain point, you shake and you don't sell and you fire back. And, a lot of that stuff Hogan got was from Austin Idol. And, Hogan being a decent guy, he admits it. So Austin Idol, if you don't know who he is, you haven't watched him, go on YouTube and look up some of his matches. To me, he was a great champion. And he was in his heyday in the 80s. So, it used to be, I would have to buy magazines. Being raised in New York, we didn't get any National Wrestling Alliance television. So I would follow these guys through the magazines, Wrestling Eye, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, just endless amounts of magazines. My friend owned a magazine store, and he would let me know when the new wrestling magazines were in. And that was a big thing. And then what we would do is in 1981, TBS came to town in upstate New York, and we started getting Georgia Championship Wrestling. And I started to be able to follow this television title a lot. And another big name that you all know, the Prince of Darkness in wrestling, so to speak, Kevin Sullivan won the title from Austin Idol. And he won it February 21st, 1980, live event in Atlanta. What are you doing? So here we go with we got Austin Idol, Kevin Sullivan, and the first two TV champions in the 80s, Steve Travis, then Austin Idol, then Kevin Sullivan. I want you to think back to 1980. These guys, I mean, Sullivan was short, but he's a beast, man. And Austin Idol, I mean, the guy lived in the gym. A lot of you don't know this, but Austin Idol used to wrestle under his real name, Mike McCord, wrestled in the WWF, and he was a power lifter. And he took some time off. We'll get into that. And he lost 100 pounds.
Wow.
And got in incredible shape. And we'll talk a little bit as we get through this title to that. But let's just go down.
What I want to do really quick is circle back. Because I think a lot of our fans don't understand the importance of tape trading in professional wrestling. And another thing you said that was like the holy Bible of pro wrestling was the magazines, because you didn't have the internet. You didn't have dirt writers and whoever was, anyone hidden behind a keyboard. There was no such thing. You had the Wrestling Observer, and you had, PW Torch, stuff like that. You didn't have just
dirt sheet.
Right.
The dirt sheet.
Yeah. And the thing with them was, wrestlers could look and the boys would share that stuff. Your top 10 most hated and, stuff like that was important to the boys. They wanted to know where they ranked and what people thought of them. And of course, tape trading is legendary because, it was, like you said, it was the only way, really, that boys could see anything about anyone else. So pick up where you left off.
You got to roll back the clock here and understand that in the 80s, there wasn't any access to the internet. I used to get the Wrestling Observer, and it was kind of an insider sheet. I subscribed to it. It would come in the mail, and I would wait anxiously for that to come because that was the insider sheet at the time. Absolutely. And it really let us know, let the boys know what was happening, what the big feuds were, who was doing what happened to everybody. And then you'd have your magazines, and it was kind of, I'll tell you a funny story about magazines. Roll back to 1994, maybe 95, but, still really nobody was accessing the internet. If you did, it was
yes, it was.
And you would get cut off. But I had just, Pro Wrestling Illustrated had just done a piece on heavyweight champions. And I was the IPWA heavyweight champion. So they put a picture of it. They talked about the title, my feud with Tom Brady. So I go to a show down here in North Carolina. I was living in Northern Virginia at the time, and I go to this event, and this guy comes up and goes, "Oh my God, you're Cueball Carmichael." I said, "Yeah," and he goes, "Did you see the magazine with you in it?" I'm like, "No." He goes, "I got it. Look," and he goes, "I can't believe it's you on the show," and it was a new promoter I was working for. Now let me tell you who this guy is. He later became Venom. I had legendary matches with him, and you remember him in the WWE as Joey Abs, Jason Arndt.
Yeah, yes, very much.
Great mind. And I used to do stuff with him. Like, I would let him powerbomb me. He was so big. I mean, I was 6'2" in my boots, maybe 6'3". He was a good 6'5", 6'6". Great shape. And I always felt comfortable with big, strong guys. So I would let him take me, throw me up for a powerbomb, and boom. You know, I would let him walk me around the ring like we used to and let the people wait for the slam to come.
Yes, most certainly. Sell it.
But I had, when he was Venom and he was in the original Omega, I had great matches with him because he listened. It was so good. And then he went to be Joey Abs. And when we ran Omega from 2006 to 2010 to like 2015, we ran that. He was at a lot of the shows. Great guy, Jason Arndt. I mean, just one of the best guys out there. Not just talented, but a nice guy. So that's what magazines did for you. All the wrestlers bought them. It just so happened that show, I was on vacation for a week at Top Sale down here in North Carolina. So I was at the beach. I grabbed the car. All my friends were there. My ex-wife was there. And I drove to a show at a racetrack by a promoter named Harold Bass. And we had a wrestling show. Big Slam was there. Bless his heart, R.I.P. brother. But that's where I met Venom, who turned into Joey Abs. And it was just so funny that here's this guy, sees me in a magazine and thinks, oh my gosh, he's here. That was the power of the magazine. And tapes, look, I bought a video machine where you could dub commentary over videotapes. It plugged in, it had headsets, it was very expensive. And I remember Steve Carino, myself, and I believe it was Julio De Niro sitting in my basement at my house and dubbing commentary over Steve's NWA 2000 promotion and over IPWA events, dubbing it over on a tape.
Nice.
And then start trading that tape, make a copy, right? You got the 2 VCRs.
That's awesome.
Make a copy, but make a copy. And, you know, when I was wrestling on the road, I would tape. Any wrestling that was on TV, I would tape. Because back then you could learn from other guys.
You're right.
Just so the tape trade, I missed that. The tape trading days were fantastic, man. It was, you might get a third or fourth generation tape, and you couldn't track it, but you hear the crowd and you could see the boys, and it was great. And that was also the time when a lot of the independents were getting a lot of coverage in the back. They would have the results from Virginia. There were results from North Carolina. The results from West Virginia. And you would, if you were an indie guy, you'd go to the back of the book and you'd look for, make sure that all the results got in. It was so long ago, I used to fax my results of my shows to Bill Apter at Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Yeah. And Bill would make sure he got them in there every week for us. And just that was, you know, those were the days. I remember when Apter called me the first time. I did the same thing to him I did to another famous guy. Apter called me and said, "Hey, Mr. Carmichael, it's Bill Apter from Pro Wrestling Illustrated." I'm like, "Yeah, try again, Julio." Click. Phone rings. He goes, "No, really, Cueball, it's Bill Apter from Pro Wrestling Illustrated." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry, I hung up on you, Mr. Apter." He goes, "Happens all the time." And he goes, "Look, we want to put you in the PWI Top 500 this year for the first time." And that's when it was legitimate. I mean, it was truly back.
Oh, if you made that PWI, it was huge.
You worked your ass off to make. That was your goal every year, was to move up into Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And so I would get that, and I would get that at my buddy's magazine shop. As soon as it came in, I would start calling the boys. I'd like, "Hey, Julio, you're like number 387 with a bullet. And Cicero, you're 318 this year, man." And it was just funny. And Interesting fact.
But it meant something. It meant something to you, and it meant something to them.
And I had the longest time of any wrestler that was out of the PWI 500 that ever came back at 12 years.
Wow.
They called me and they said, look, man, we want to put you back in. And it's been 12 years, and that's the longest anybody's ever left and came back. So if you know the story of Meatloaf the singer having a hit in the 80s and nothing again until like 2005, it was kind of like that. I think there's somebody that was out longer now, but at the time it was 12 years. It was the longest absence in return to the PWI 500. But, I was working really hard for the National Wrestling Alliance and working with Bruce Tharp and doing a lot of stuff. And they were kind of molding me for something that didn't happen. But I was wrestling a lot.
Yeah.
In that last year that I was in there. I probably wrestled 45 times that year. I mean, it was crazy. So I worked hard to get back in there. I never expected to get back in there. It was never my goal, because at that point it kind of became a little bit of a work. So I didn't really, care that I was in it. But when Abner did it, it was for real.
Yeah, it was when Abner did it. Absolutely.
So then we got Prince of Darkness, Kevin Sullivan. And, geez, you could do a whole dossier on him. I mean, unbelievable talent. Great booker.
Yep.
A great
Maybe
booker.
one of the best.
Yeah, maybe. Listen, I think Kevin Sullivan has one of the greatest wrestling minds of any human being alive. I mean, when he was booking, things were going great. I mean, I always say the day wrestling went in the toilet is when writers replaced bookers. And he was one of the best. So, great wrestler and one of the best. And then Sullivan has it for an incredible 28 days. And he loses the title to Austin Idol on February 21st. And this is Idol's, he has it 3 times, but this is his second run in the 80s that he gets the title back. Now, keep in mind, the TV title was defended weekly on television. So that title changed hands a lot. And there's a couple of reasons why it did, but number one is because there was so much talent.
There was so much talent in the 80s.
And, it went like this. TV title was a big deal because you got broadcast time. You were getting seen by people, which means your value goes through the roof. You could be a guy who's working every one of the Omni shows, 3rd or 4th match, and nobody has a clue who you are. But when you had the TV title, everybody knew who you were. And these titles were stepping stones to bigger titles. I mean, the TV title was a stepping stone to the National Heavyweight Championship. The National Heavyweight Championship was a stepping stone to the world title. So these actually had a significant purpose in the 80s. So Idol has it again in 1980, and he has it for 2 days. So he gets it February 21st, 1980, and he loses it the following 2 days later to Tommy Rich at a live event in Georgia versus a televised event. So he loses it to Tommy Rich, and then Rich ended up vacating the title in order to pursue Harley Race for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship.
But doesn't that, and this is me, I'm asking you, Kay, I know everyone has their own opinion, but don't you think in a way that devalues your belt? Like, you got a title, you should be happy, you got the championship. Don't you feel in some way, though, Q, like you're kind of saying this belt isn't good enough for me? And back then, the championship, it meant a lot if you held it. And if you're putting it aside, and I'm not taking anything away from him, because that's not his doing. As we spoke earlier, there's bookers, right, there's people in place. But where's your mind at with all that?
Well, the psychology is this. They didn't want to have 2 titles on any one person. So if Tommy Rich is going to keep the TV title and wrestle for the world title, what happens if he wins? He's got 2 titles. The NWA never did that at that time. They just didn't do it. So it was a pre-thought out, planned out program where a lot of people thought, hey, Tommy Rich is probably going to win the World Heavyweight title. And you got to understand, at that time, Tommy Wildfire Rich was on fire.
He was, yes.
People related to him because he was blonde. He talked like he was from Tennessee, a little bit sort of hillbilly. No offense to anybody from Tennessee, but he had a big southern drawl. And he didn't have a bodybuilder's build. And what that did was that made the average guy think, gee, I could be him. I could be Tommy Rich. I don't need to go to the gym for 5 years. So Tommy Rich, the way he looked, great baby face fire, the way he looked, and the fact that the average guy could relate to being him was very important. And that was part of the plan, is to get the belt on some guys where, here's what happens is most guy wrestling fans in the 70s or 80s lived vicariously through these champions. They felt like they were the guy winning the title. If they loved Tommy Rich and he won the title, they went home that night and couldn't sleep because they were thinking about Tommy Rich and, gee, I could be him. And that's the truth. So these, you got to understand. Luthez told me one time, the best match of the night is the one people go home talking about.
Yes, most certainly.
And, that is very true. If you're going home and you're talking about a match you saw, it's kind of funny. There's a local guy here, Anthony, who sometimes pops into our show. It's not Anthony B. It's another Anthony. And about the Buddy Landell Memorial Cup, funny story, pile driver was illegal. It's Tracy Smothers and Damian Wayne in the championship match, right, for the Buddy Landell Cup. The ref gets knocked down, and Damian pile drives Tracy, which is an illegal move. I wasn't on the show at all, but everybody here knows me. But I didn't want to get my ego involved in the show. So Damian and Tracy came up with this plan. So keep in mind, this is a town of 1,000 people. We had about 300 there. Everybody knew me. Buddy's mom was there. Buddy's niece was there. Sam Houston flew in from Canada to be at the show. So it was a really good event. So I run in while the ref's down, and I pile drive Damian, and I throw Tracy on top. I slide out and shake the ref. 1, 2, 3. Tracy wins the cup. But this guy, Anthony, every time I see him, he did it the other day. He said to my buddy Hal, who was the retired chief of police, he goes, did you go to that show? Cueball, man, he pile drive Damian Wayne, and I'm not kidding you, he was this high off the ground. He jumped up so far, I thought he killed him. That's probably the 10th time he's told that story when he runs into me with other people. So that's kind of the little tiny thing that people went home talking about. And listen, it's nothing to do with me. I didn't get in it. I wanted Tracy to win the cup, but I wanted to make it interesting, and I sort of needed to be involved because everybody knew me and they were disappointed I wasn't wrestling on a card. So I gave him a little bit. But, it's just funny. Tracy Smothers is one of those guys that you can spend endless hours picking information from him. I've known him for 25 years. He's great. So Tommy Rich vacates the title. And then we get a guy who's got the title, who was a great wrestler until he went to the WWE and he became the Red Rooster. And unfortunately, Terry Taylor is probably most remembered for being the Red Rooster.
Why don't you hold up? I want to talk a little about the Red Rooster and where that went, but I got to take a quick break, and we come back. That's where we're going to pick it up.
Sounds good, man. Stick around.
All right, we are back here on Turnbuckles, Trunks, and Titles. And Q, really quick before you pick it up with the cock-a-doodle-doo, man, I just need to quickly say about SCR Services, who is a very good friend of mine, Scott Rigby, who is here in New Brunswick. St. John, New Brunswick, but all over New Brunswick, he is starting something and trying to make a difference, and which is why it is so important to him that it's their satisfaction is his priority. So I just want everyone to know that here in New Brunswick, that Scott Rigby is here for you. He is, it's one call, we'll do it all. So, I just quickly want to throw that out there for you, Scott. And I know things are great. I know you're listening, and I'm sure you're loving what we're throwing you here.
Well, we talked about it off the air before the show and saw some of his work. And, man, I can tell you, this guy, he puts the customer first, and he does what they want to do, and he does a great job. So, from what I've seen, he's just amazing. And if you need any home improvements at all, pick up the phone and call him first, because if he can't do it, he'll definitely steer you in the right direction and take care of you. So.
Absolutely, he will. Yes.
Yeah, great. I love helping local people out.
I know you do, and that's why I knew you were going to be on board. Let's talk about Terry Taylor. A lot of people like to say that, Vince fed him to the wolves, and that is all hearsay, because as well as I do, Vince is never going to come out and say, hey, I want to talk about Terry Taylor for a moment. So we're going to get past that. What a lot of people don't realize is what you're actually about to tell them, is that Terry Taylor was a worker at one time.
Unbelievable. I mean, look, if you go back and look at any Terry Taylor matches on YouTube, and he worked for Vince and sent me down the ramp a couple of times, him and Bruce Pritchard, the guys. But I can tell you, he could flat out go. And you don't hear me say guys can flat out go if they can't flat out go. He was so talented and so skilled that they threw that gimmick on him. Now, that's also an era where they came up with Bastion Booger, and Vince was coming up with crazy gimmicks. There was that
plumber,
Manitar.
Manitar, the plumber.
You got to understand what he was doing is he was trying to create characters to put into cartoons at that time. That's what he was really trying to do. So look, wrestling's pretty simple, right? If you go to a place and a guy like Vince McMahon says, hey, I want you to shave a T in your chest, for Titan Sports and the hair, and I want you to wear, a girl's dress, a jockstrap underneath it, and we're going to go ahead and black out your front teeth. I'm going to pay you $350,000 a year. I'm like, let's go get it done.
Yeah. Where's the nearest place we can do this?
Right. When you're going to get a contract, you got to understand, we say something in wrestling, there's no such thing as bad PR.
No, there isn't.
If Terry Taylor hadn't done the Red Rooster, I don't think people would have ever discovered the true Terry Taylor and seen some of his Florida stuff and some of his Mid-South stuff and some of his NWA stuff. And I think they really would have deprived themselves of seeing a fantastic, flat out go, man. He was so good. So if you haven't seen pre-Red Rooster, go put in Terry Taylor and look at some of those matches, man. The guy never got blown up. He was in great shape. He was crisp, sharp, just really good, and just a true workhorse,
Yeah, he was.
Kind of interesting because when they did this, when he won the title, it was a live event in Atlanta, and it was Ken Patera and Bob, God rest his soul, Armstrong, were in a tournament with Terry Taylor. So it was a round-robin type tournament, and Terry ended up winning the TV title. And look, the TV title is a big deal. He had it for almost 3 months, from August 22nd to October 12th. It's also a big deal who you lose the title to, right?
Absolutely.
He drops the strap to Terry Funk.
Well, if I'm losing the belt, I want to lose it to a guy like Terry Funk.
There's no shame in putting Terry Funk over, believe me.
None.
I mean, you gotta understand that was probably when they said, "Hey, you're gonna wrestle Terry Funk." He's probably like, "Can I put him over? Can I please put him over for the belt? Can I?" It's a
And
thing where you want to pay homage to Terry. And I know Terry personally through Manny Fernandez, and spent a few hours with him one on one, and just a great guy. I mean, we had a seminar back in 2013. It was Manny Fernandez, and it was Terry Funk, and it was a Trans South Wrestling. And I had a bum neck. I just found out a few months before that my neck was broken. We weren't sure yet if it was going to be super solid or not. So the doctor, until we had another MRI and stuff, didn't really want me wrestling. But I went down there and I went to the seminar, and I took my buddy, Bobby Wolfert, so he wrestles as. He's a former staff sergeant, retired United States Marine Corps, now prison guard. Jose Flores III. He's on my friend's page. Great guy. So him and I drive down, and he participates in the seminar. Now, he's from Michigan, and there's 25 guys. And Terry Funk keeps going, "Come on, Michigan, you can go." And Bobby was an amateur wrestler. He wrestled in the Corps, but he was able to convert that into the pro style, but still keep some of the amateur moves in. And Terry loved that. I mean, he could go right in the middle for 10 minutes without touching a rope or a corner. And Terry just loved them. But if you think about it for a second, man, it's the 80s. Terry Funk dropping the TV title to Terry Funk. You're going to be just as famous dropping the title to him as you would be winning a title from him.
But let me say really quick, just a second, what you're saying and the importance of it. Don't forget in 1998, don't think for a second that the New Age Outlaws had any issue dropping the tag titles to Terry and Mick at WrestleMania 14 in Boston in the Fleet Center. So right. Just remember, guys, when he says Terry would have probably been, "Oh, no, this is great, thank you." Believe me, the same thing came out of Billy and out of Brian's mouth when that opportunity arose. Believe me.
Yeah, and I can tell you, Terry Funk would be in the back, and he'd go over and go, "Thank you, brother. That was really good. Thank you very much." And then he would hug the guy. And when Terry Funk comes over and says something like that to you and gives you a hug, man, back then and still to today, that's like, how do you put it? My Mount Rushmore of wrestling has Terry Funk up there. Let me just tell you that. He's one of the guys up there. And we won't get into that right now, but he's
that's a whole new show right there.
Yeah.
Mount Rushmore's.
We'll have to get everybody's Mount Rushmore wrestling. But Terry has it about 3 weeks, and he drops it willingly in Columbus, Ohio, to Steve Kern.
Oh, wow. Steve Kern.
And let me tell you something. This list is a list of who's who in 80s wrestling, man. It's. I could go on. I could do a whole show on each guy. I really could, but I'm not going to right now. Maybe eventually we will. We'll never run out of material, that's for sure.
No, we won't.
And we're just in the TV title. So he drops to Steve Kern. Kern has it about 3 weeks, and he drops it to Sullivan. So it's going from one heel to another heel via Steve Kern. So, and that's the way he did it. A lot of times in the old NWA, they loved the heel champion, right? Baby faces were transition champions most times.
Yeah, they were a heel. They were a heel industry. We talk about how Vince was all about the belt always stayed on a face. They were face oriented. That's what it was. Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior.
Sure.
Always a face. And then NWA was always Ric Flair, Kevin Sullivan. They always kept the heels on top. But Q, why though? Tell the fans, why did the heel always stay on top?
Because people will go to a arena or stadium or buy a ticket or watch a TV show to see somebody they hate get their ass kicked.
You're damn right they will. And that is an old saying by the old timers. You'd rather see the bad guy get his butt whipped and somehow he'd crawl out of there with that belt, hell or high water, DQ, count out, any way to get his ass out of there just so he could stay alive in the building.
How many times do we see Ric Flair grab somebody's trunks, put his foot on the rope,
Yeah.
get him in a figure four and grab the. I mean, just the ultimate. You know, we used to say you got to cheat to get heat.
Yeah.
But you want to cheat where the ref doesn't see it, but everybody else does. And if you watch these guys, they were masters at doing a lot of cheating when the ref was in the wrong position or you know, he was yelling at their manager. All the managers, he would always yell at them. They would distract them, and that's where they would cheat. It was just great.
Hey, Ric Flair was such a cheater that I heard Puerto Rico is still looking for him.
Oh, yeah.
There's been enough riots over there to last a lifetime when Ric Flair was in town.
Yeah, Puerto Rico, man. Not the safest place in the world to wrestle, if you know what I'm saying. No offense to Carlos Colon and his family.
No, he did a great job.
The people there take it just as serious as the fans did in the 70s and 80s.
Yes, they do.
Yes, today. They don't care. So now we've got the belt. Funk drops it to Kern. Kern drops it to Sullivan. And then Sullivan has it for about 2.5 months. And in 81, at a live event in Georgia, he drops it to Steve O. Steve O is another guy we could do. Steve Olszewski. We could do a whole nother show on Steve O. Just an incredible guy. But,
how come that name escapes me?
You know, you might know him as Steve Olszewski, but he wrestled as Steve O. He was more, how do I put this right? He was more of a TV guy or more of a third match at the Omni type guy or fifth match or whatever. Great guy.
I'll have to look him up.
But, you know, what happened is he was the baby face to put the belt on to get it off Sullivan.
Oh, there you go.
And then Steve O has it from January 16th, 81 till January 22nd, a week. And he drops it to one of my favorite guys in the whole world. There's a great picture of me and him on my Facebook page. And this guy I ran into for the first time in 20-something years. And he came up and said, didn't we do a show in Mississippi together once or Alabama? I said, yes, we did. Georgia Championship Wrestling. And he walked up and remembered me. And it's none other than the most amazing leg drop off the top rope, the best punches in the world, beautiful Bobby Eaton.
Oh, yeah, Bobby Eaton. There you go.
Great guy. Just, you know, I mean, he seriously walked up to me at an event about 4 years ago that we were having. I was wrestling Lou Marconi. It was a benefit. And he walks up to me and he goes, Cueball, didn't we do a show together like once in like Mississippi or Alabama? I said, Alabama, Georgia Championship.
Don't you love it when they remember that stuff?
Oh my God. Bobby Eaton walks up to me and remembers me. It's like, you know, I mean, it's crazy. So, you know, for a guy like me, I don't mark out for him, but to have somebody you haven't seen in 20 years come up and remember you, it happened to me last October. Duke the Dumpster Drosy.
Yes, she told me this.
Yeah. So, I mean, when a guy comes up and you haven't went over and talked to him, and he comes up and he goes, hey, didn't we do this together? And it happens to me a lot. A young kid will come up. He'd be like, hey, Cueball, you remember we were on a show together in 98 in Pittsburgh? And honestly, I don't remember, but I'm not going to tell him that. I'm like,
no, let him think you're super smart.
Oh yeah, where was that? Oh, it was at the Meadow Center over there just outside of Pittsburgh in Washington Township. So I said, Sal Conti promote that? He's like, yeah. I go, oh, yeah, I remember that show. And I didn't even wrestle him, but he remembered me. But you don't ever want to shoot somebody down. It's not about lying. It's about going, oh, yeah. I didn't say, oh, yeah, I remember. I said, oh, yeah. So where was that at? And in my head, I'm trying to put it together. I said, well, did you look different back then? And he goes, yeah, I wore the bib overalls. I was the Amish guy. And I'm like, oh, my God. I threw him through the ropes by his bib overhauls, and all I heard was this. And he went head first to a gymnasium floor.
Oh.
He didn't get up. I thought I killed him.
Well, I'm sure he didn't get up.
He had an Amish dress or Mennonite, wherever you're at. That's, you know, the flowered long dress and a little white hat. And she comes over and gets him up. And he gets up and he turns around. He's got a goose egg on his forehead the size of an orange.
Oh.
I mean, it was enormous. It was so big, I wanted to cut it and just let it drain.
You sick man.
And I'm like, oh my God, I remember that battle royal. Didn't I throw you out on your head? And he's like, yeah.
That's the one.
He goes, I'm surprised you remember anything after that one. I mean, seriously, bro. I thought I felt so bad. And then he tells me, he goes, well, I've never really got thrown to the ropes. And I'm like, you've been wrestling a couple of years, right? He goes, yeah, but, nobody's ever tossed me out like that. And, back in the day, it's like, look, Chris Taylor, great wrestler out of Pittsburgh, Ryan Mitchell, Ryan Mader on Facebook, those guys will tell you. And Lou Marconi will vouch for the fact that I have the short arm clothesline from hell. When I put you in a corner, I put you in a corner. You don't have any choice. When I pull you and you go by me, I shove you as hard as I can in the back, and you go in that corner, boom. Because fans are sitting 10 feet away. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're very close.
Very close, and everything that you do is exposed. So, and I've heard guys get the BS chant at the ECW arena, or the you up. And I, never wanted that stuff. Not that I was rough on guys, but I was very physical in there. And it makes for a better show.
You're also old school, and old school, it was the real way, and you were going to make sure that you laid your stuff in. Yeah. Hey, Q, hang tight. I got to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We know this is going to be more than a 2-parter, probably an 8-parter, but just sit still. Don't try to run.
Stay with us. Glad you're back with us at Triple T Radio. Turnbuckles, Trunks, and Titles. We're having a great show talking about National Wrestling Alliance, NWA TV title holders. Just for me, I'm like in my heyday, man. It's just exciting. I love this stuff. I live for this stuff. And we got up to beautiful Bobby Eaton having the title. And then he drops it back 2 days later to Steve-O. Now, Bobby has it. He's a heel. He drops it to Steve-O. So where's it going to go next? Going to go to a heel. So who's it go back to? Kevin Sullivan. But they let Steve-O have it for a day.
But you know what? Austin Idol, like, I know we're not going to get into Austin Idol today. I already know that. There's just no way. But, you know, one of the great things about Austin Idol was, you know, I think a lot of it had to do with they could count on him. You know, we hear stories of guys that you put the belt on, but then they'd start no-showing or they wouldn't make a town. And that was a big deal. If I'm putting a belt on you, you're representing my company. You're going to be there because there's, you know, back then, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13,000 people on hand that came to see you.
It was a big deal. And let's sidetrack a little bit and talk about Austin Idol, if you don't mind, because
if you want to get to it.
This, you know, a lot of things people don't know about Austin Idol is he wrestled originally as Mike McCord, and he was Mean Mike McCord, and he had a run in the WWF. He was always in great shape. He graduated from high school in Tampa, Florida. How many great wrestlers came out of the Tampa area?
A lot.
Man? It's Tampa is like Western PA for quarterbacks, you know, Montana and Namath and all those guys. But he was wrestling as Iron Mike McCord. I'm sorry. And he was just a big guy. I mean, you wouldn't recognize him. He was 340 pounds. He was a power lifter. So he played football. He was an all-star, obviously, with that big. When he was in the WWF, Lou Albano was his manager.
There you go.
They had big things against him, and he had a couple of championship matches against Pedro Morales when Pedro Morales. Sorry,
easy for you to say.
Pedro was the heavyweight champion, you know, so he had matches with him. So if you bring him in, right, and you're putting this guy against the world heavyweight champion in the WWF, you really got plans for him.
Yeah, you got money riding on him.
He wasn't getting squashed by Pedro. He was getting elevated to Pedro's level. That's what they were doing. How do we elevate this guy? What a lot of people don't know is Austin Idol, Gary Hart, Bobby Shane were passengers in an airplane, a little Cessna 182 flown by wrestler Buddy Colt. Everybody remembers that name. And on February 20th, 1975, the plane crashed.
In 75?
Yeah, 1975.
Wow.
Sadly, it killed Bobby Shane. Everybody else lived, but were banged up. Obviously, we know about Ric Flair's plane accident.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, that was only 3 years prior.
Well, you know what happens is small plane flying back then was not safe at all. Not at all safe. You're flying by sight, not instruments. It's not the safest way to go in those older Cessnas. He broke both his ankles in the crash.
Wow.
So, you know, I mean, you're off your feet completely. I mean, it doesn't matter. But when he came back, check this out. He'd been killing it in the gym. He lost 100 pounds. He was no longer Iron Mike McCord. He was the universal heartthrob Austin Idol. Bleached blonde hair, 100 pounds lighter, killer physical condition.
He was Idolmania.
Yeah, well, and you know, Austin Idol was probably most famous. He had a massive feud with Jerry Lawler. And for people that don't know it, in the old CWA in the Mid-South, I mean, Jerry Lawler used to run and sell out the Mid-South Coliseum.
Jerry Lawler was huge, make no mistake.
Yeah, people don't understand. They see Jerry the King Lawler and they think, oh, the guy slapped Andy Kaufman, which he did. But you don't understand is Jerry Lawler promoted ranch shows in the Mid-South Coliseum, held about 12 or 13,000 people. And he would pack this on, like, oddly enough, a Tuesday night or a Thursday night, not even just the weekend.
Yeah.
But he would run shows there. And they did this angle in the CWA and the AWA territory, American Wrestling Association, very popular. They had an angle in 81 where Idol dressed up as a masked Mexican wrestler, right?
Great.
He wanted to give an award to Jerry Lawler on TV before the show started. So he came up, he spoke a little Spanish, gave the award. I don't think anybody knew it was Idol. I really don't. I
Nice.
think that everybody was completely duped into thinking that this was a Mexican wrestler. And this is why, guys, back in my day, I didn't get my first tattoo until I was 42 years old, because a tattoo would mark you. You know, I mean, look at Demolition. I mean, Smash had that big tattoo. He had to cover it up because everybody knew that he'd been Russian.
Yeah.
So tattoos were something that not a lot of guys got back in the day. Now it's cookie cutter. Everybody gets the
Never
same.
saw Hulk Hogan with one back in the 80s.
No.
Or the Warrior. Or Ric Flair.
Nobody did it because those guys worship their bodies, number one. And number two is, if you were in WCW and you had a big, massive tattoo and Vince hired you, wanted to pay a ton of money, guess what? You either get rid of it or cover it up.
Yeah, you're covering it up.
That's the way it was. So anyway, he attacked Lawler, which
Nice
was
guy.
great. Which is great. Yeah. Well, Lawler had thrown a fireball at Idol in '87 and actually burned the side of his neck pretty bad. But they ended up in a steel cage match. And of course, with this Tommy Rich hit underneath the ring, which is kind of cool in the event. And so anyway, he won the AWA Southern Heavyweight Championship. And it was a hair versus hair match. So he actually shaved Lawler's hair.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a big deal back then.
You're right, it was.
Everybody that had hair was proud of it, right? And with the exception of George Animal Steel and Ivan Koloff, there weren't a lot of guys that shaved their head back then. So it was a big deal when that happened. And then about 1990, he kind of retired a little bit from wrestling and started taking it easy. But, you know, here's a guy who wrestled probably 250 nights a year for the whole decade.
His whole career. Yeah, yep.
You're looking at between 22 and 2,500 matches in a decade. Guys are lucky to get that in their career. And he did it in 10 years. So, you know, he started, but he still wrestled Memphis Power Pro. He was retired, but he wasn't really retired. You know what I mean? So he actually had a podcast in 2012 that he launched, which is pretty interesting. And he appeared on Jim Cornette's podcast that kind of spawned him to get his own podcast. But, you know, now he in 2017, I think he did a Combat Zone show. He didn't wrestle. He just showed up. He got involved in the NWA, and he started managing Nick Aldis for a while. But, you know, quietly, he's been running a school down there in Alabama. And the kind of interesting thing about it, him and I are friends on Facebook. He doesn't comment much, but he puts a lot of his videos up of the kids. And it's so funny because he's smart enough, obviously, with his career in wrestling to know that these kids are never going to be Austin Idol. But you can see a lot of his influences in these guys, which is great. Very talented young guys that he's trained and working with. So, but, you know, he is responsible for Hulkamania.
Yes,
so
he is.
For Hulk Hogan fans, no Austin Idol, no Hulkamania.
That's right. He coined the phrase.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, you have to understand the importance of all these cogs in the big wrestling gear picture. You know, if it weren't for some guys, other guys would have never had a career. So, I mean, it's pretty important to remember those guys. I mean, it really is.
Sure
and so
is.
We got Steve O's the champion. He drops it back to Kevin Sullivan. So he was the babyface between Bobby Eaton and Sullivan. And then Sullivan has it for about a week and a half, and he drops it to Steve Kern. But then it's deactivated April 1st, 1981. They deactivate the television title. Now, for the life of me, I can't figure out what the mentality of that was. Obviously, it was successful because you've had 42 champions in the 80s already. It was something that the fans who couldn't afford to go to the arena, you know, it's hard. Mom and dad working back in those days, it's $20 a ticket. You want to take your 3 kids, you kill $100.
Oh, yeah.
For a week, you know. It's easier to go fishing back in the day, you know, cost you $2 for a can of thing of worms or something. But it was very expensive to go to the Omni and places like that back in the day, and not a lot of people could do it.
Yeah.
Our newest sponsor. Just kidding. Wish it was. So, they the title from 81 until 83, and then they decide to have a tournament, and they pit the Iron Sheik versus a guy we're going to talk a lot about next week. I was a big fan of him, Ronnie Garvin. So he was just Ron Garvin then. But he won it. He defeated, the Iron Sheik defeated Ron Garvin by disqualification in the tournament. And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Some promotions, 10 count outside the ring, guess what? You lose the title.
That's right.
I mean, it makes everything different, right?
Oh, yeah, it does.
It makes it interesting because nobody's going to milk a count. Nobody wants to get counted out. And it makes it very interesting when you see guys constantly trying to get back into the ring, baby faces, and the heel cutting them off. So he ends up winning the title. And then the Iron Sheik loses it about 3 months later to guess who? Ron Garvin.
There you go.
Again, they were in that Garvin era. They were starting to build Garvin towards the world title very early in his career with the TV title down there. And then, of course, at a live event in Atlanta, he loses the title November 6, 1983 to a guy I know you're going to know. I won't say a friend of mine, but I know him. I wish he was a friend of mine. I admire him. None other than Jake the Snake Roberts.
Yeah, there you go, man. Yeah.
Probably one of the greatest psychological promo men in the business.
Hands down.
Great mind for wrestling. Second generation. Really, if you haven't seen Beyond the Mat? Is that the one with a minute? If you haven't seen that.
Yeah, he does a piece. But if you haven't seen the resurrection of Jake Roberts, go watch it.
You got to watch them together. Them together. See the differences. It's unbelievable. But I will tell you that, Jake was a guy who, when he was clean, was just awesome.
Yep.
Great guy to be around. I was supposed to wrestle him in Pennsylvania in about, I think it was maybe 2000, 2001. And he came up and he's like, look, Cueball, you're established here. You were the champion here. I want you to make sure that I don't want to have to go out there and just short arm clothesline and DDT. Let me go talk to the promoter.
That's respect.
The green guy. Yeah, because he said, I got too much respect for you to do that to you. I said, look, brother, I don't mind doing it. And he's like, no. He goes, I don't think it would be the best thing. And I'm like, you don't argue with Jake Roberts, right? I'm like, all right, man. So that's where we're going to leave it for this week. When we come back, we're going to go a little bit more in depth to Ron Garvin because he actually wins the title back from Jake the Snake. And this is starting to build the Ronnie Garvin, the Hands of Stone guy that we all knew and watched, who was just one tough SOB. So, look, guys, we appreciate being here tonight. We want to ask you to do a small favor. If you could head over to Triple T Radio, one word, Triple T Radio, space live at YouTube, and just hit like and subscribe because it really helps us out. If you enjoyed the show, put a comment in there. Also, what we want to do is start in the corner pocket, start getting your ideas of your Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling.
That's how this show got aired tonight because of the corner pocket. I need to say that. Finished, but it's the corner pocket that got this show picked tonight on the poll. Go ahead, Q.
Yeah, the corner pocket is, Cueball's corner pocket. If you're not a member there, I know I got somebody sent a friend request there. Send a request over there. I'll vet you a little bit, and then I'll let you in. If somebody refers you, it's the best way to get in there. But we do control it. We've had it for 7 years. We've kept it down. We've got about 1,100 people in there. But we've got guys like Adam Baum, Brian Clark's in there, Jack Lord's in there, Damian Wayne's in there, Tracy Smothers is in there. I mean, the list goes on of guys in there that are talented, that share information. But thank you. The corner pocket, 7 years in the working. My friend Jazz Kumar over there in England put it together for me. So look, if you're not a member, join. But listen, we want to thank you guys for hanging out with us and talking 80s NWA TV title. I hope you all enjoyed it. This is Cueball Carmichael for Nick London and Triple T Radio. We're going off the air, but we'll see you next Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, the same place you saw us tonight. Get over to YouTube for us, Triple T Radio, one word, space live, and click like and subscribe. Leave us a comment. Talk about your Mount Rushmore of wrestling in the corner pocket. Let's get that started, and we'll pick up where we left off next week. And we're actually going to finish up the NWA TV title. Then we're going to roll into the NWA National Heavyweight Championship, which has a storied list of people in it. I think you're going to be impressed. Do a little homework, add a comment, help us out. We love you. We appreciate you watching. We'll see you in a week. And don't forget, if you're a fan of conspiracy theories, we're ending the JFK series on Truth Busters this Thursday night, 8 p.m., same place you saw this show. And we're going to end the JFK conspiracy, the murder. We're going to give you a bunch of proof. And we're going to tell you the real reason why he was killed. And I think it's going to blow your mind. So I'll see you guys Thursday night. For Nick London, the greatest producer and YouTubing and video and podcasting and all that other stuff. And you'll get to see me and Johnny Stewart Thursday night with Nick in the background. So thanks for joining us tonight, guys. We love you. We'll see you next week.